In 1943, a steel mill foreman's wife in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, named Loretta, kept a single ledger book on the second shelf of her pantry. Her husband Earl earned $38 a week at Carnegie Steel. $14 went to rent on Brereton Avenue. $3 went to the war bond allotment Earl signed up for before he got his draft deferment. What remained, $21, fed 4 children through 2 winters and 1 coal shortage. By 1946, Loretta had $940 in a passbook savings account at the Pittsburgh National Bank. Her neighbors assumed she was getting help from her mother's family in Shadyside. Her mother's family had nothing. Loretta had a system, not a budget, not a spreadsheet, a system. She ran it from a 9-cent composition notebook she bought at Woolworth's in April 1942. She never bought another one. She didn't need to. They managed money differently, not with discipline alone, but with a logic so airtight that scarcity could not find a single crack. These women did not look like they were building anything. They looked like they were surviving. Neighbors saw patched dresses and reused tinfoil in gardens where grass used to be. What the neighbors didn't see was the arithmetic. These women were running a financial system more sophisticated than anything their husbands understood. It had no name. It had no book. It worked. We threw every one of those habits away the moment the supermarkets opened their doors and the credit card companies started mailing applications to every address in America. We called it prosperity. We called it modern. The women who had stretched a 48-point ration week into 7 meals for 5 people called it Tuesday. The Federal Reserve's 1946 post-war savings report found that American homefront wives had accumulated $35.4 billion in personal savings between 1942 and 1945. We spent the next 40 years learning how to spend it. Today, 57% of American households cannot cover a $1,000 emergency. Loretta could cover an emergency. She'd already thought of it. Number 7 on this list saved a Navy wife in Charleston $312 in a single year using nothing but a rubber band and an empty jam jar. Number 14 was practiced quietly in every Red Cross chapter in America until the Office of Price Administration spent 18 months trying to classify it as a controlled activity. They failed. And number 1, the habit more home front wives practiced than any other, the one that was never named, never taught, never written in any government pamphlet, turned $18 a week households into the most savings-dense demographic in American financial history. The numbers are real, the women were real, and every single one of these habits still works. Hit subscribe. Let us count down the 25 forgotten ways WW2 home front women managed money that still work today. A steelworker's wife in Gary, Indiana, named Agnes, stood at her kitchen table every Sunday morning in 1944 before she touched her purse. She counted out her week's cash into 6 envelopes. Each envelope was labeled in pencil: groceries, coal, shoes, medicine, church, emergency. The grocery envelope held exactly $7.20. She never opened another envelope to supplement it. The Office of Price Administration's 1943 household survey found that families using pre-allocated cash envelopes overspent on food by 22% less than those who shopped with loose funds. Agnes didn't call it envelope budgeting. She called it knowing what you have before you touch it. The bank never taught her this. The ration book did. A munitions worker's wife in Lowell, Massachusetts named Helen kept a white ceramic jar with a metal lid beside her stove from 1942 to 1945. Every strip of bacon, at $43 a pound in 1943, produced rendered grease. She stored it all. Grease replaced butter for frying. Grease replaced lard and pastry. Grease was traded with neighbors for vegetables at a rate of 2 tablespoons for a head of cabbage. The USDA's Victory Garden Bulletin of 1943 noted that fat salvage at the household level reduced a family's cooking oil expenditure by an average of $1.10 per month, or $13.20 annually. In 1943, that was 5 weeks of bread. Washington rationed the fat. It could not ration her reallocation. A Navy man's wife in Charleston, South Carolina, named Dorothy, observed Meatless Tuesday and Wheatless Wednesday every week from 1942 onward. But Dorothy's Meatless Tuesday was not a sacrifice, it was an accounting event. The Office of War Information's 1942 household survey found that families who replaced 2 meat meals per week with legume-based meals reduced their weekly food cost by an average of $1.85. Dorothy used that $1.85. She did not pocket it. She redirected it to the shoe fund for 3 children. Shoes cost $1.49 per pair at Sears in 1943. She never once paid for children's shoes out of the main grocery budget. The government rationed the meat. It could not ration her reallocation. A factory girl in Detroit, Michigan named Ruth mixed 1 quart of fresh whole milk, 14 cents per quart in 1943, with 1 quart of reconstituted powdered milk, 6 cents per quart equivalent, every single morning. The children could not tell the difference. The War Production Board's 1944 data showed that 38% of American home front households adopted partial powdered milk substitution by mid-1943, reducing dairy costs by an average of 32 cents per week. Ruth ran the calculation. 32 cents multiplied by 52 weeks was $16.64. That was 1 month of electric bill. She never once fell behind on utilities. A shipyard worker's wife in Baltimore, Maryland, named Vera, bought 1 good wool overcoat in October 1941 for $6.80 at Hawkschild Cone. She wore it for all 4 war years. She did not buy another coat for herself. She bought fabric, 40 cents a yard at the Five and Dime. She remade the coat's collar twice. She relined it in 1943. She let out the hem in 1944 for her oldest daughter. The War Production Board's 1943 textile rationing data showed that women who repaired and refashioned existing garments saved an average of $14.20 per year per family member compared to replacement purchasing. For Vera's family of 5, that math was $71 annually, almost 2 months of rent. The coat wore out in 1946. By then, it had already paid for itself 3 times. A Gold Star widow in Baltimore, Maryland named Mildred planted her first Victory Garden in April 1943 in a 15 by 20 foot lot behind her row house. The USDA's Victory Garden Bulletin of 1943 reported that a well-maintained 300 square foot garden could produce an estimated $90 to $120 worth of vegetables per growing season at OPA ceiling prices. Mildred's garden produced tomatoes, beans, kale, beets, and 2 varieties of squash. She canned 47 quart jars in August alone. She sold 12 jars to neighbors at $0.15 per jar. She had spent $3.20 on seeds and 40 cents on canning lids. Her net return was $64.40 in food value and $1.80 in cash. The ration book ran out every month. The garden did not. A Red Cross volunteer's wife in Dayton, Ohio, named Frances, kept a second notebook alongside her household ledger. It was a repair log. Every item in the house that broke was entered with 3 columns: the item, the cost to replace it new, and the cost she paid to fix it. A broken window latch, 22 cents to fix, $1.10 to replace. A cracked mixing bowl, 0.03 cents in adhesive, $38 to replace. A torn mattress seam, $0, fixed with a needle in 12 minutes. The American Red Cross Home Service Report of 1944 estimated that homemakers who practiced routine household repair rather than replacement saved between $28 and $45 per year. Frances's ledger showed $51.60 in 1 year. She used the figure as proof, not for anyone else, for herself. Washington set the price ceiling. She set the floor. Number 18, the Bread Day calendar. An army wife in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania named Clara baked bread every Tuesday and Friday, not because she enjoyed it, because a 2-pound loaf of commercial white bread cost $0.09 in 1943. Her homemade loaf cost $0.041 in flour, yeast, salt, and fuel. The Office of Price Administration's 1943 Cost of Living Index documented that bread and grain products represented 11.4% of the average home-front household's food budget. Clara baked 104 times in 1944. She saved $5.09 that year on bread alone. She rolled that $5.09 directly into her quarterly war bond purchase of $18.75. She did not count the $5 as savings. She counted it as contribution. The bakery offered her convenience. She offered the bakery nothing. A woman in Mobile, Alabama named Cora Lee worked the swing shift at Brookley Field Aircraft Modification Center from January 1943 through August 1945. She earned $27 a week. Her husband Raymond was with the army in North Africa, then Italy, then somewhere she was not allowed to know. She sent him $3 every month in the form of a small postal money order because she had read in a pamphlet that soldiers could cash them near the front. She never knew if he did. She banked $8 every Friday, without exception. She did not bank $8 when she was sick. She did not bank $8 when the roof leaked in March 1944 and cost her $14.50 to patch. She banked $8 even then, because she had a separate envelope for exactly that kind of emergency, and she had been filling it since November 1942. When Raymond came home in September 1945, Cora Lee had $872 in a savings account and $140 in bonds. She had also paid off the $230 balance on their furniture installment plan, a debt Raymond didn't know she'd cleared. The Federal Reserve's Wartime Savings Report of 1945 found that women managing households alone during the war years maintained savings rates averaging 26.4% of income. The national average for two-income households in 1945 was 8.1%. They did not save more because they had more. They saved more because they understood that every dollar had exactly one job, and they were the only one there to assign it.
A factory girl in Akron, Ohio, named Irene, had one rule about the telephone in 1944. She used it twice a week. Twice only. Local telephone service cost $1.75 per month for residential lines in 1943. Long distance was billed by the minute at $0.35 for 3 minutes during peak hours. Irene's mother lived 60 miles away in Cleveland. Irene called on Sunday evenings at 8 p.m. Off-peak rates dropped to $0.20 for 3 minutes. She spoke for 6 minutes. She spent $0.40 per call, or $1.60 per month. Her coworker called her own mother 4 times a week at peak hours. That coworker spent $5.60 per month on calls. The Office of War Information's 1942 Communications Survey found that households which set deliberate telephone schedules spent 71% less on telephone costs than those who called without planning. The wire connected the same two people. The discipline disconnected from the same mistake. A shipyard worker's wife in Norfolk, Virginia, named Edna, never bought any item costing more than $0.50 from a single source. She checked 3 prices first, every time: the 5 and dime, the corner grocery, the dry goods store. Sugar at the 5 and dime was $0.31 for 5 pounds. Sugar at the corner grocery was $0.34. Edna bought sugar at the 5 and dime. The Office of Price Administration's OPA ceiling prices were a maximum, not a standard. Retailers could charge below ceiling. Most customers didn't know that. Edna did. The OPA's 1943 enforcement report found that price variance between retailers in the same neighborhood averaged 0.93% on common household staples. On Edna's $8 per week grocery budget, 0.93% was 74 cents per week. Per year, $38.48. The ceiling told her the most she could pay. Nobody told her she had to. In 1943, 6 wives on a single block in Gary, Indiana, organized something the government had no name for. Each woman had different ration point allocations based on family size. Each woman had different needs. A widow with no children had surplus sugar points. A mother of 4 had surplus coffee points. They traded, not money, points. The Office of Price Administration technically governed ration point transfers. The OPA's 1943 Enforcement Division spent 14 months attempting to categorize informal neighborhood point trading, ultimately declining to prosecute private household exchanges. These women traded points for labor, produce, preserved goods, and services. The War Production Board's 1944 data estimated that informal neighborhood resource networks reduced individual household expenditure by an average of $2.40 per week in participating households. Washington could track the points. It could not track the porch conversations. A Gold Star widow in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, named Beatrice, kept a mason jar on her bedroom dresser labeled in her own handwriting, "Shoes." Every week she placed $0.15 in the jar. Every week, without exception. Shoe resoling cost $0.65 to $0.85 in an independent cobbler in 1943. New children's shoes cost $1.49 to $2.10. Beatrice's 3 children each needed resoling roughly 3 times per year. Her jar funded every repair. She never once bought new shoes during the war years. The American Red Cross Home Service Report of 1944 noted that families with dedicated repair funds for specific categories spent 41% less on those categories annually than families who repaired on an as-needed basis from the general fund. Beatrice never ran short. The jar was always ready. The shoes wore out on schedule. The fund did not. A woman in Bremerton, Washington named Pearl lived 2 blocks from the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. Her husband was somewhere in the Pacific on a destroyer escort. She worked part-time at the shipyard cafeteria from 1943 to 1944, earning $0.48 an hour for 20 hours a week. That was $9.60 per week. She also received her husband's $22 per month family allotment check from the Navy. Her total monthly income was $60.40. Her total monthly expenses, rent, food, utilities, clothing, coal, came to $44.80. The difference was $15.60 per month. She saved all of it, every dollar. Pearl did one thing that separated her from every neighbor on her street. She wrote the savings number first, before she wrote a single expense. She wrote $15.60 at the top of the page and put it in a column labeled Done. Then she wrote the expenses below it. The savings was not what was left, the savings was what was first. She had read this principle in a 1941 pamphlet from the Treasury Department, titled How to Keep More of What You Earn. The pamphlet cost nothing. It was free at the post office.
A munitions worker's wife in Dayton, Ohio, named Grace, withdrew her weekly household cash every Monday morning. She withdrew exactly $14.60. Not 15, not 14. She withdrew the precise amount she had pre-calculated in her Sunday notebook. She never returned to the bank midweek. If she ran short on Thursday, she made do. The Office of War Information's 1942 Consumer Behavior Survey found that households which made a single weekly cash withdrawal spent 18% less than households which made multiple smaller withdrawals across the week. The act of seeing the whole sum and watching it shrink created a physical accounting that a bank balance never could. The bank kept the money. She kept account. An army wife in Lowell, Massachusetts named Evelyn preserved fresh eggs in water glass, a sodium silicate solution, costing $0.22 for a 1-pound can in 1943. A dozen fresh eggs cost 52 cents in spring when hens laid prolifically. In November, a dozen cost 74 cents. Evelyn bought eggs in May and June in volume. She submerged them in the water glass solution, stored them in her cellar, and used them through January. The USDA's Victory Garden Bulletin of 1943 documented that sodium silicate egg preservation maintained edibility for up to 9 months under proper cellar storage conditions. Evelyn's spring to winter egg arbitrage saved her $0.22 per dozen across an estimated 6 dozen winter eggs. That was $1.32 in 1943 dollars, roughly $22 in modern purchasing power. The calendar said November, her cellar said May. A steel mill worker's wife in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, named Agnes, bought coal in August, not October. August. Coal ran $4.20 per ton in August 1943, according to OPA ceiling data. By October, demand pulled prices to $5.10 per ton at independent dealers, where ceiling enforcement was inconsistent. Agnes ordered 2 tons in August every year of the war. She spent $8.40. Her neighbor ordered 2 tons in October and paid $10.20. Agnes saved $1.80 per year on coal alone. She also bought coal sacks at $0.05 each in summer to restack loose coal, reducing waste from ground contamination by an estimated 12% of volume. The Office of Price Administration's 1943 Fuel Cost Survey documented significant regional price variance for coal outside peak season. The cold came in October. She had already answered it in August. A Red Cross volunteer in Baltimore, Maryland, named Clara, kept a handwritten index card inside her ration book. On it were 12 substitution pairs, ingredients she could swap when prices or availability shifted. Vinegar for lemon juice, $0.09 versus $0.21 per equivalent use. Cornstarch for flour and gravies, $0.04 versus $0.07 per thickening unit. Oats for breadcrumbs, $0.03 versus $0.11 per cup. The card had no title, it was just facts. The USDA's Victory Garden Bulletin of 1943 documented that households with practiced ingredient substitution habits spent an average of $1.40 less per week on groceries than those who cooked strictly to recipe specifications. Clara's index card was not a recipe, it was a pricing tool. The cookbook told her what to use, the index card told her what it cost. A Navy man's wife in Charleston, South Carolina, named Helen, kept 4 jam jars on the top shelf of her kitchen cabinet in 1943. Each jar was labeled in her handwriting: rent, coal, emergency, Christmas. Every Friday, payday, she placed specific amounts in each jar before she spent a single cent on food or anything else. The emergency jar received 75 cents per week. Within 1 year, it held $39. The Christmas jar received 50 cents per week. By December, it held $24, enough to buy 4 small gifts and a tree without touching any other fund. The rent jar never ran short once in 3 years. The Office of Price Administration's 1943 household survey found that physical cash separation, keeping money for specific purposes in separate physical containers, reduced budget overruns in the tracked categories by 63% compared to households keeping all cash together. Helen's 4 jars saved her an estimated $312 in avoided overdrafts, late fees, and emergency borrowing in 1943 alone. The bank was 1 account, her kitchen was 4. A factory girl in Detroit, Michigan, named Marion, did not buy a single book, magazine, or pattern publication from 1942 to 1945.
The Detroit Public Library System held 2.1 million volumes in 1943. It held back issues of Good Housekeeping, The American Home, and canning and preserving manuals issued by the USDA Extension Service. It held pattern books for garment construction. Marion checked out 2 items every week. She paid $0. The War Production Board's 1944 data estimated that the average American household spent $6.40 annually on pattern publications in household management magazines. Marion spent $0. She also attended free canning workshops at the library. Free. The bookstore was open. So was the library. She chose the one that cost nothing.
There is a woman no one wrote a pamphlet about. Her name was Josephine. She lived in a 2-room apartment in a Polish neighborhood on the south side of Pittsburgh in 1942. She spoke English as a second language. Her husband, Stanislaw, worked rotating shifts at Jones & Laughlin Steel for $34 a week. He sent $11 per week overseas, not to the war, but to his mother in occupied Poland through a church network that somehow still moved money across lines that governments had closed. Josephine managed the remaining $23. She had no pamphlets. She had no government guidance. She had a system she had learned from her own mother in Krakow before immigrating in 1929. You buy nothing you can make, you make nothing you can repair, and you repair nothing until you have first asked whether you needed it at all. That was the entire system. 3 sentences. Her grocery bill never exceeded $6.80 per week for a family of 3. She canned 62 jars of pickled vegetables in 1944 from a community plot she shared with 4 other women, paying 30 cents for her share of the seed costs. She owned nothing on installment by 1945. The Mass Observation Archive from Britain in 1942 documented almost identical behavioral patterns among working-class women across the Atlantic, the same 3-tiered discipline: make, repair, question. It was not taught, it was transmitted, woman to woman, kitchen to kitchen, generation to generation, until one generation decided it no longer needed to be. A Gold Star widow in Norfolk, Virginia named Hazel refused every installment offer she received during the war years. Furniture on installment, a radio on time payment, new kitchen appliances through the company plan. She refused all of it. The reason was arithmetic. A $28.50 kitchen table purchased on a 12-month installment plan at the standard 1943 carrying charge of 18% cost $33.63 total. Hazel waited. She saved 60 cents per week in a dedicated furniture envelope. After 12 months, she had $31.20. She paid cash. She saved $2.43 on that one table. The War Production Board's 1944 consumer credit data showed that American home-front households paid an aggregate $214 million in installment carrying charges in 1943 on non-essential household goods. Hazel did not contribute 1 cent. The store offered her the future on credit. She offered them cash for the present. A shipyard worker's wife in Baltimore, Maryland, named Rosemary, kept every receipt, bill, and price notice she received from 1942 onward in a paper bag hung on a nail inside her pantry door. Once per month, she sat down and sorted them. She was looking for patterns. She noticed that coffee prices at her corner grocery rose 0.03 cents per pound every 6 weeks before an OPA enforcement inspection. She began buying double before each anticipated rise. She noticed that her electric bill spiked in months when the children were home from school, and she adjusted accordingly. The Office of Price Administration reported in 1943 that fewer than 4% of American households tracked retail price movement at the individual item level. Rosemary was in that 4%. Her annual grocery expenditure over 4 years tracked $1.90 per week below the neighborhood average for a comparable family size. The bag looked like clutter. It was a database. A munitions worker's wife in Detroit, Michigan, named Frances, sat down every Sunday evening and wrote out every cent spent during the prior 7 days. Every cent, not categories, cents. She wrote them in her 9-cent composition notebook in a column. Then she wrote the total. Then she wrote the total from the prior week next to it. She did not evaluate or judge, she observed. The act of writing made spending visible in a way that memory never could. The Federal Reserve's Wartime Savings Report of 1945 documented that households which maintained written weekly expense records had average monthly variances 41% lower than non-recording households, meaning they spent almost exactly what they planned to spend almost every single time. The money didn't change when she wrote it down. She did. They knew exactly what they had. Every item on this list, the envelopes, the jam jars, the repair logs, the substitution indexes, the paper bag archives, was a different expression of the same discipline. These women had perfect knowledge of their own financial position at all times. Not approximate knowledge, not rough knowledge, exact knowledge, to the cent, every Sunday, every week, for years. All 25 habits were tools for maintaining that precision. The goal was never frugality. The goal was clarity. You cannot manage what you cannot see. They made everything visible. They wrote down what they had. They named every jar. They pre-allocated every envelope. They checked 3 prices before spending a single quarter. Loretta in Pittsburgh never thought of herself as a financial strategist. She thought of herself as a woman whose family needed to eat. But when Earl came home from Carnegie Steel in September 1945 and she handed him the passbook with $940 in it, he did not understand how she had done it on $21 a week. She showed him the composition notebook. 4 years of Sundays, 4 years of columns. He sat at the kitchen table and turned the pages for 20 minutes without speaking. The 9-cent notebook was simply the receipt. The discipline it contained had purchased something no number could measure. She was not running 25 systems. She was running one with such fierce consistency that 24 others arranged themselves around it. From the outside, these women looked like they were enduring. Patched aprons, gardens in what used to be lawns, children in resoled shoes, kitchens that smelled of dried beans and saved grease. They looked like people the war was happening to. They were something else entirely. They were the most financially disciplined generation of American women who ever lived. They operated in genuine scarcity, not the feeling of scarcity, but the fact of it. And they built systems inside that scarcity that outperformed every financial structure the post-war era would invent. They did not have financial advisors. They had composition notebooks. They did not have budgeting apps. They had jam jars and pencils and a knowledge of exactly what a pound of butter cost and whether it cost the same at 3 different stores. We traded this for convenience. We traded it for the credit card that arrived in the mail in 1958 and told us we didn't need to know how much we had because we could always have more. We traded the composition notebook for the app that rounds up our purchases and calls the difference savings. We traded the jam jars for a checking account we never balance and a budget we build on New Year's Day and abandon by February. The women on this list didn't save money because they were virtuous. They saved money because they were precise. Precision is learnable. It requires no income, no app, no subscription, no financial literacy course. It requires a 9-cent notebook and the decision to sit down on Sunday evening and look at what is true. The ration book is gone. The jam jars are still available. The pencil hasn't changed.